and climate change. Objective introduction concept of global commons, climate change, a global problem of common, tragedy of common and common heritage of mankind, global government of climate change, conclusion, glossary, everything. And objectives in this chapter explain the concept of global commons, examine the concept of climate change as a global problem of commons, and describe the issues with regard to global government of climate change. Introduction. Rapid economic growth all over the world has led to the massive extraction of the nature resources found in global commons. In many cases, the extraction has been higher than the natural capacity to replenish, leading to its fat depletion. Therefore, there is an urgent need to conserve global commons. International community has felt the urgency of conserving the resources for the well-being of not only the present generation but also the sustainability of future generation. Historically, access to most of the resources found within the domains of global commons was difficult. Moreover, the resources were not sacred. Therefore, global commons were safe from human encroachment. However, in the recent past, on one hand, there has been tremendous advantages of science and technology, and other demand from the resource has also increasing manifold. This has led to increase the various activities such as fisheries, scientific researches, laying of submarine cables, etc. Increase in atmospheric activities and excessive emission of greenhouse gas have resulted in climate change, which is considered to be one of the most serious threats to the world at the present. Climate change is often said to be the most prominent problem of global commons. Two of the most relevant questions related to the climate changes are A. Who will take the major responsibility to control the situation? And B. How to manage a global problem? Due to the special characteristic feature global commons, one or few nations cannot govern or ensure sustainable use. World level cooperation is needed for this purpose. Therefore, presently global commons are the focus of international interest, particular for the perspectives of global governance. This unit discusses some of these issues. It goes in the issues of climate changes in details. It explains the concept of global commons and elaborates the climate change is global problem of commons and deals with the global governance of commons. The unit examines these two concepts that dominate the relevant legal discourses and examine the debate around them from the perspective of development, vice versa, developing countries. In concluding with a discuss on design principle for sustainable governance of commons, since future of the world is dependent on the joint use the global commons. In governance, it became increasingly relevant for achieving sustainable development. Concept of global commons. Global commons is an aspect of more generic concept of commons in the particular context of resources. Therefore, understand the concept of global commons. It is first necessary to understand the concept of commons. Let us now see what the common means. Common. Susan Janberg, 1998, in her book The Commons and Introduction, has explained common in the context of resource through two different approaches. A. Two attitude of resource exclusion and subtractibility, and number B. Concept of resource domains and poverty rights. Two attributes of resources exclusion and subtractibility. Exclusion is a possible of excluding others from using any resources. For example, it is quite easy to exclude people for using the personal swimming pool, but it is difficult to exclude people from the common pond in the village or a lake in the city. Subtractability is the extent to which use of the resource by one diminished and amount left from the other. For example, the food in your lunch box on a particular day is highly subtractable. It means if someone else grabbed that, you will not able to eat it. Common pool resources are those which are high in subtractability but low in exclusion. For example, resource found in village, forest and common pool resource. Every villager is entitled to collect fruits or even other resource to limit amount. Therefore, exclusion is low. But once some fruits are collected by one villager, those fruits are no longer available for other villagers. Those are highly subtractable. Therefore, in this case, village forest is commons. Resource, resource domain, property rights. Resource is something which is used to meet the need of any living being. Natural resources are those directly extracted from the nature for use. Example, air, water, wood, natural gas and oil, iron, coal and others. Resources are located in fixed spatial dimension which is known as resource domain. Example, fish is found in the ocean resource domain. Common are simply the resource domain where common pool resources are found. Common can be a small example, the village pond for fishing, or sustainable large like the ocean or solar system. Global common. Common pool resources are also known as common property resources. The term property in case of resource is a bundle of rights such as rights of access, exclusion, extraction or sale for captured resource. Poverty rights may be held by individual, group of individuals such as community or even nations. The very large common that do not fall within the jurisdiction of any one country are known as international commons or global commons. However, there is a slight difference between international commons and global commons. International commons are resource domain shared by more than one nation, such as Mediterranean Sea, shared by different countries such as Spain, France, Italy, and Greece, Turkey, Syria, Israel, Egypt, Malta, and many others. Global common, on the other hand, are resources domain to which all nations have legal access, such as the outer space. Therefore, according to Bunk, the distinction between the two is important, especially because international commons are exclusionary for some countries while global commons are not. Traditionally, global commons have been defined as a part of planet which fall outside the national jurisdiction of any country and which all nations have access. Historically, common pool resources have been extracted by government and individual as rapidly as possible. Only four global commons have remained expectation to the trend, mainly because of difficult in access them. Moreover, values of resource they contain has not been enough to justify the effort of acquiring them. There are following: 1. High sea, the ocean. Number 2, Antarctica. Number 3, the atmosphere. Number 4, the space. However, in the recent years, there has been tremendous advantages of science and technology, and demands of resources have increased manifold. In this changing context, concern for restoring these global commons is became necessary important. Marketer Research Institute of Global Common and Climate Changes, Berlin, defined global commons as natural resource which require global corporations of their sustainable use, such as atmosphere, land, and forest. In fact, some scholars define global common much more broadly, including education, science, information, and peace. However, international law defines only the above mentioned four types of common and global commons. Climate change and global problem in commons. Climate change is one of the most serious environmental risks to the world and present. The main reason behind this threat is excessive emission of greenhouse gas by different countries. According to technical definition of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, in 1992, climate change refers the changed climate, which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alert the combustion of global atmosphere, and which is the addition of natural climate, where a variable observation over comparable time period. In simple words, climate change refers to a long term, more than 30 years, trend for weather pattern. Climate change is often claimed to be the global problem of common for the following reasons. 1. Atmospheric in greenhouse gases can be understood as a common pool resource, just like a fishery. Although fishes can be easily understood as commons, which provide fish as a resource. The atmosphere is a global common in slightly different manners. The resource which is found in the atmosphere is clean air. Although it is not extracted, it does become contaminated as a pollutant are added. It is difficult or almost impossible to exclude any nation from the access to the atmospheric or clean air of so the capacity. The atmosphere and sink service is subtractable because one unit used by one user is not available to other. If carbon emissions are viewed as using up to the carbon absorption capacity of the air, then one country emission reduce the atmosphere capacity available to the countries. Presently, there are excessive emissions of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere by different countries. It has gone beyond the nature sink capacity of the atmosphere, which is causing climate change. International community knowledge the urgent need of conserving global commons, example atmosphere. But there are different regarding regulation. We will discuss these aspects next section. Explain the meaning of global commons. Commons are simply the resource of domain where common pool resources are found. Common pool resources are those which are highly in subtractability but low in exclusion. Subtractability is the extent to which use of resource by the diminish and amount left of others. Exclusion is a possible of excluding other from using the resource. Common can small, example village pond or for fishing, or significant large like high sea or solar system. Why is climate change in problem in global commons? Property in case of resources bundle of rights such as right to access, exclusion, extraction or sale of the captured resource. Poverty rights may be held in the individual goals of individuals such as communities or even by nation. The very large commons that do not fall within the jurisdiction of any one country and termed international commons in global commons. International commons are resource domains shared by more than one nation, but global commons on other hand, the resource domain to which all the nations have legal access. Tragedy of the commons and common hierarchy of mankind. The tragedy of commons and common hierarchy of mankind are the two popular concepts that domain the legal discourses or governing global common Ragnadan 2016. Although both the concepts point out towards the sharing and prevention of common resources, there are some different. Let us explain two concepts. Let's discuss a debate around them. 1. Tragedy of commons. 2. TOC. According to biologist Gerhard Hardin, 1968, human beings are descent for thieves, which is a reason for explosion of common. According to him, uncontrolled share resource is often over exploitation because the interest in individual users to minimize the short-term use. Hardin has explained the case of destruction of common pasture. Her herdsman has increased the castle grade on those. He also provides the examples of pollution, where the ration of man find the share if the cost of emission in the common is much less than the cost of purify it. The incentive behave at free riding problem or shifting cost of other, but as in a result, this behavior adds a large cost of pollution. To overcome this tragedy, Hardin it was suggested that common should be enclosed, the entry should be restricted. He suggested to enter privatize the ensure the resource so that it is the best interest of the owner to take according long-term effect or to have a top-down government rules and limit resource use. According to him, access could be based on first common, first basis, or actuation, lottery, or wealth. Acknowledging fact that all these choosers have others on limitation. Hardin advocates that even then a decision has to be made to restrict access to the common heritage of mankind. CHM. The common heritage of mankind, articulated by the diplomat Arvid Pardro, 1967. They reflect the ideas natural reserves beyond to all of us, not only for the present generation, but even for future generation. Therefore, we can neither be denied right nor the responsibility in using natural resource. Pardon adopt different views of tragedy, particularly in the contents of international commons. He was concerned about enclosure of seabeds, Mediterranean Sea particularly by technological advanced state. His fear was the rich country who have resources to spend oceanographic research and exploit oil, gas and minerals from the common seabed. Poor countries which also have right to this common seabed with suffering as a result. Result. To avoid the outcome, Pedro Ibid was suggested establish of the treaty rigment by the United Nations General Assembly, such as regime could ensure the peaceful and ordinary exploitation of seabed on the principle that it is a common heritage of mankind and thus should be used in interest for all, especially in developing states. Debates around the TOS and CHM. Although both concepts are in concern about prevention of common resources, there are noticeable differences, particularly with responsible to the role of development, vice versa, developing countries in conserving global commons. Toyosi is alleged to be taking discrimination and prejudice statistics in favor of the developing country. Cities, example, English Commons, Hardin or opposite has suggested that who should be enclosed and there should be restricted. However, according to Ragnathan 2016, the illustration was fall in English. Common has been successfully managed by the commoners over long periods. In fact, many empirical research has given able example to successful common management across the world. Even in India, similar arguments is provided for tribal people efficiently managing their common forest. Another criticism of Hardin suggested for restrict and access emergency in background of existing inequality in the world. Gupta in 2019 has argued the rich countries and rich people will invested in a manipulate access to the commons. The poor will suffers. Actually, tragedy will be inadequate and access to the utify for the commons. Apart from the inequalities of access, impact of degradation of global common is also linked to social justice, historical development. Countries have followed energy intensive growth path leading to more emission, greenhouse gases, and climate changes. At the same time, developed countries possess capability to avoid negative impact in climate change. But on the other hand, developing countries, particularly at the least developed countries, who have contributed very little climate change and higher vulnerable to the adverse impact. In the light of the thing criticism developing, national has support in the common heritage approach to the global and international commons. In 1992, the common concern mankind has been adopted as a alternative to but not substitute for common heritage in the predictable of UNFCCC Taylor 2017. Global governance regard under to the umbrella on the UN has to be advocated to ensure the prevention of global common for future generation. is ordered to achieve sustainable development goals. This question remains, what will be the ideal global governance of climate change? Let us discuss in our next section. Global governance of climate change. Regarding global governance, climate change, although atmosphere meet that the two criteria of global common pool resource, it is function as a sink for carbon dioxide uh, or CO2 and other greenhouse gases. It was not governed by common in beginning of 21st century, Gupta in 2019. It was the unregulated no man's land which was freely accessible and appropriate by everyone in most region of the world, with expectation of European UN, EU and few other countries that have started to praise carbon emission. Later on, it was realized the efficient governance of atmospheric global cooperation and coordination of climate policies of different nations. But national face a strong collective act problem. This is because everybody can benefit from the absence of one party without contributing to the associated cost of abatement, while the cost is borne by the abandoning state alone. There are two aspects which make governance in climate change difficult. One, global commons. The atmosphere is a particular context or outside the nation uh, jurisdiction of any country. Number two, something conservation of global commons and sustainable use of resources found within. Conflict with national sovereignty and regulation. For example, in some countries there might be plenty of fossil fuels in ground, but the disposable space for CO2 arise out of its issue is limited global common, namely atmosphere. Thus, we find the governance of climate change is a complex issue which requires global cooperation for sustainable future. In this context, contribute Nobel laureate or Ostrom is extremely significant. Let us discuss some detail. Institutional analysis and development framework of governance of commons. The term global governance is defined Fangelstein 1995 of governing without sovereign authority, relationships that transcend national boundaries, doing internationally what governors do at home. This definition of global governance make it clear that it is closely linked with the study of public administration. In her book Governing Commons 1990, Eleanor Ostrom has addressed the question regarding the whether and how the common pool resource should be managed so the both excessive consumption and administrative problem could be avoided. She presents numbers of success stories of managing common pool resources, each located within a single country, and understand how they were governed really. The success story 11, both public and private players played an instrumental role in successful management of common. Intervention of extreme policy regarding were helpful few cases only. The success story is driven, and both public-private players played instrumental role in successful management of commons. Intervention of extreme political requirements were helpful in a few cases only. Moreover, in many cases, it even impact negatively. Ostrom thus challenges convict of many policies analysts that the problem of common can only be solved by external authorities by imposing private property right and central regulations. Consequently, in law, Ostrom has developed framework called Institution Analysis and Development IAD to summarize the lesson to successful effort. In managing small-scale common pool resource, the framework has identified 8 design principles for sustainable small-scale common pool resource regime. Number 1, there must be clarity defined boundaries of user pool, appropriate and the resource domain. Number 2, appropriation rule must be compatible with the local condition within a provision rules which regulate user input for resource maintenance. Appropriation rules and provision rules together are called operational rules. Number 3, collective choices arrangement. Ensure the resource user participate in setting approach in the provision rules. Number 4, monitoring is done by the appropriate by their agent. Number 5, graduated sections are applied to appropriate who violate operation rules. Conflict resolution mechanisms are ready to available, low cost and regiments. Right to organize regiments and recognize external authorities. For common pro regiments are part of a large system, needed enterprises are aggregate institutions with local, regional and national jurisdiction. According to Buck, a IAD framework has become key of analysis of management of government of global commons. Although all 8 of the design principles are applied by the answer global commons. 5 of the particular relevant clearly defined in boundaries. Compatibility of operation rules and local condition, monitoring, graduate sanction, and nest enterprises. However, while Eleanor Ostrom made great progress towards understanding the management of local common pool resource, herself suggested that there was a need for more research in the governance of global commons in order to face the global changes of climate change. Ostrom was outlined several principles of design by such policy. All reduction in greenhouse gases emission the beneficial and there is no single solution. Singly small actions can have significant sequence. Number 3, program must be sensitive context. Number 4, trust is a critical resource. And number 5, all political have multiple effects. And real political work more than one level and we learn by doing. Since the future of the world is depend on the joiners to the global common, governance is becoming increasingly relevant for achieving sustainable development. Check your progress too. Explain the two popular concepts that dominate the legal discourses. Global commons. The tragedy of common TOC, the common heritage, mankind, CHM. According to TOC, the national mankind find that a share of cost of his emission into the common is much less than the cost of purify, but this behavior as an outcome added to large cost of pollution. To overcome this problem, TOC suggested that common should be enclosed and there should be restricted. According to CHM, natural resource has been all of us not only for the present generation but even the future generation. Rich countries have resources exploitation common which can suffer of poor countries which also having right to those common. To avoid the CHM suggests establish a treasury regiment poor interesting of all. 5 is governance of climate change difficult. TOCC alleged for taking discriminatory and prejudiced of favor and development countries. Restriction access of English common as suggested by TOC has been criticized. Harding suggests for restrict entry of access by challenging in the background for existing inequality in the world. Impact of degradation of global common is also linked by social justice. Developing countries are pushing for CHM under the umbrella UN. Global common atmosphere is a particular context or outside nation justification of any country. Sometimes conservation of global commons and sustainable use for resource found within conflict with national sovereign and regulation. For example, in some countries there is a mighty plenty of fossil fuels in ground, but a disposable space for CO2 arising to its use in a limited global common, namely atmosphere. List 8 design principles IAD framework to the Eleanor Ostrom. There must be clearly definition boundaries to upper pool, appropriation and resource domain. Appropriation rule must be compatible with the local condition and with the provision rules. With the regulator input resource maintain appropriation rules and providing rules together are called operational rules. Collective choice arguments ensure the resource under the participation, setting appropriation and provision rules. Monitoring is done by the appropriate or by their agent. Guaranteed Sanctions are applied to operator who violate operational rules. Conflict resolution mechanisms are really available. Low cost, legitimate, right to organize regular, uh, right to organize regime are recognized by external authorities. For common poor regiments that are part of a large system, instead enterprises are great institute with local, regional, and national justification. All reduction in greenhouse gas emission are beneficial, and there is no single solution. Similarly, small actions can be significant consequence. Program must be sensitive to context. Trust is critical resource. All political have multiple effects. Real political work at more than one level and we learn by doing. Conclusion. History of lack of access of global commons keep the safe from human enrichment. However, technological development and rapid economic growth across the world lead to unstable use of natural resources found in the global commons. The unresulted in urgent need to conserve the same. Climate change is often cited the most prominent consequence of misuse the global commons. However, one or few nations cannot resolve the situation. Rather, other wide cooperation record. Therefore, global governance commons is major international interest. The unit has through the light on that. The unit has the explain the relevant concept of elaborate why climate change is often cities global problem commons. It has extended the debates over two popular nation and domain and relevant legal discourse from the perspectives of developing vice versa developing countries. And also highlighted relevant contribution of Nobel lecturer Eleanor Ostrom is providing design principles of sustainable governance of common in general, the climate change and particular. These units help us to understand the fact as to high third dimension of sustainable development. Namely, environmental sustainability is characterized by weak global governance regime allowed to UN Conference Sustainable Development and held uh, in Rio de Janeiro in June 2012. Did conveys the coherent global governance framework. However, its success would require a participation in the global level between all countries, multilateral organizations, civil society, and other stakeholders. These units had tried to us wave may now large framework into the broad debate in sustained development. Glossary. Anthropologists. The term anthropon is the impact result from the human activity. Some human activity cause demands to environment either directly or indirectly. Example pollution, overconsumption, overexploitation, deforestation, etc. Atmospheric sink. In the evolution of atmospheric process, the atmosphere is called sink. The sink is a dominant pathway which gases remove from the present atmosphere. The biological process that tend to remove gas from the atmosphere are called sink. Collective action problem. It is a basically social dilemma and situation where all the individual put better of the corporation by the failing to so because conflicting interest between individual which discourage joint action. Greenhouse gas. Gas that absorb the emit radiation energy with uh, with the terminal infrarange. The gas are carbon dioxide, methane, hydrogenous oxide, sulfur, hexafluoride, hydrofluorocarbon, perfluorocarbon, etc.